You're very welcome back. Now, over 200,000 people in Ireland have ADHD, and for more than 50,000 adults, the diagnosis comes later in life.
Here to talk us through their new guide to adult ADHD in Ireland, we're joined by ADHD coach Ailín Kennedy and writer and journalist Mike McGrath-Bryan. Thank you both so much for being here, talking about your ADHD and the diagnosis that you had in adulthood. So, Ailín, why did you go for a diagnosis?
Yeah, so I always struggled with my mental health and all through my childhood, teens and adulthood in my 20s. And I just, I didn't know what was going on with me, and I just didn't seem to have any answers. So eventually, when I was 30, I was referred for an official ADHD diagnosis. And then I was officially diagnosed when I was 32 because I was struggling so much.
What was that struggle? What was it like?
I mean, there's just so much to it. I really struggled in school. Like, I really struggled with attendance and studying. And, we'd turn up to school and I wouldn't have realised we had homework, and I'd forget to do things. I'd lose everything. And even though I had been there, maybe I mightn't pick up on those things, and that caused a lot of stress and shame.
Mike, similar experience?
The things that held my interest, the things that I loved doing, I was absolutely able 100% to apply myself to. It was the things that kind of maybe didn't hold my interest, or the things that I didn't see myself being able to apply myself to. My poor man would be sent home with parent-teacher meetings, could do better, must try harder, etc. And that's the kind of thing that you internalise over the course of your childhood, your adolescence, going into work, going into college, etc. You don't realise that your motivation or your recall or your ability is different. It's framed as less than because, you're in a system that prioritises one way of looking at things, one way of studying, one way of processing information and getting through the system. So I suppose for me it was a case of variables of attention. Like, I was always good with words. I always loved music. I always, that variance of attention for me, I suppose, presented itself as a surplus of focus on one thing to the detriment of other things. And, there comes a point where that starts affecting your daily life. There comes a point where it starts affecting how you navigate through the world. So much like Ailes, I went in for a consult, a referral, and then an official diagnosis along the same lines.
And for you, how does that sort of manifest? I know I've asked various people who have ADHD what it felt like for them. And I know that's different for people, but how would you describe it if someone was at home going, what was it like before, and what, because you're on medication now, are you?
Yeah.
You see, so is there, what's the difference for you?
I think, to me, the first thing was getting a diagnosis meant having the information to hand as to, before when you woke up in the morning, it was why am I like this? Now it's okay, here are the internal factors, here are the external factors, here's what I shouldn't feel ashamed about needing help with and looking for facilitations or accommodations with at work or in institutions. And just even the self-compassion that comes with that knowledge, that information, that, a diagnosis, that further post-diagnostic kind of help or conversations, etc., brings to you. And I think that's what we try to bring to the book as well, is not only our own experiences and those of our interviewees, but also the evidence base that kind of underlies the conversation that's been going on, that, once you understand yourself a little bit better, once you get the manual to the video game, it doesn't make it any easier, but now you can strategize.
You have to read the manual. That's the problem with it.
Listen,
speaking of manuals, this is your book, Have I Got Your Attention? A Guide to Adult ADHD in Ireland. It is built out very practically for people probably who do suffer with ADHD in terms of short, very easy to go through topics. Do you wish you got a diagnosis when you were a kid?
Yeah, I do. Upon reflection, I think it would have really helped me to, I suppose, I always felt different and I still feel different, but I think it would have helped me to understand that it wasn't bad different. It was just a different wiring that maybe I needed to accommodate and to understand a lot more.
Yeah.
And now that I understand it, I can accommodate it. And yeah, life is just better now.
We know that this is very, like we talk about waiting lists for children all the time when it comes to mental health services. ADHD diagnosis within the HSE, the public system, is from 2 to 4 years. An awful lot of private entities have opened up. We totally do get that. Ailín, for you, with increasing awareness, we know that ADHD, like most things in life, there's differences between men and women. So I think the science kind of says women mask more and then can kind of do that their whole their whole childhood. So that's a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So a perfect example, you know, I was in school, I'd come home, I was very quiet and shy in school, and then I'd come home and I would just let it all out and be screaming and have a big meltdown because I was just holding it in. And then you get into teen.
I think there's a lot of parents who might be at home going, oh my God, like just talking to friends of mine who are starting to put it all together. They're like, they're so good in school and then everything changes when they're home. Because it's that stress, is it? Yeah, and I think as, you know, when you're a young girl, you learn to socialise a bit differently and to hide it. You know, it's not as acceptable maybe to be, even though I still said the wrong things at the wrong times. But yeah, and then obviously there's the whole hormonal side. When you get into teenagehood as a girl and, you know, you start menstruating, there's a difference then. And then, of course, as women, we have to deal with menstruation and then, yeah. That interacts with your ADHD too. Okay.
Because you would have thought, like, for boys, it's like boisterous and lack of concentration. Like, in terms of this, whenever you're talking about the waiting lists, like, what is the situation like in terms of getting a diagnosis? How long does a diagnosis take? Because if you are a child and you are struggling in school, and if you're a parent watching this morning, but they just can't get their kids checked out or looked.
Well, we approach this from the perspective of adulthood because while there's a lot of conversation at the minute, and rightly so, about the delays in the system, public or private, in getting a diagnosis and getting the subsequent supports for people of all ages, we were coming at it from the perspective of adulthood. And at the minute, while there are steps toward creating an effective public service, many catchment areas around the HSE are developing plans independently of each other. And you know, that's still in the capacity building phase, so to speak. And say, for example, down in Cork, where we're from, you can only get a public referral and diagnosis if other issues present themselves to your own detriment.
Oh, really?
Likewise, the private sector at the minute, I suppose the conversation has changed in recent years, and there's a lot more kind of capacity being built in pre-existing private practices. There are places that are opening up that are dealing with ADHD specifically. And so while the waiting lists are kind of vacillating and kind of reducing slowly, there are those practical issues that present, like, affording it. The aftercare is still a big point that we kind of come across repeatedly as well. Yeah. So, there are all these things that are still in the air because the conversation is so new, because the system is still reacting. And I know that you had to go private. You're both very clear in this, that you're not medical professionals, but you talk to so many people. And one very interesting question is, you ask people with ADHD in your research, and you talk to people in all different professions, is it a disability? And the answers, they're so varying, and it's so interesting.
Yeah, now listen, how to get assessed in Ireland, managing it, ADHD medication, what it's like to live with ADHD. It's very interesting. It's very well laid out. Have I got your attention? Ailín Kennedy and Mike McGrath-Bryan, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us.
Thanks a million.